Tony and I decided to do this topic because a lot of what we implement as far as our game plan, whether it's nutrition, whether it's training, whether it's anything else in the fitness and health arena, typically doesn't fail because of the actual game plan. It fails because we're not in the right mindset of trying to reach that goal, whatever that goal may be. So hopefully within these next few minutes, you can take a nugget or two away from this that can actually help you reset where you are, understand what your goal actually is, and how to achieve it without actually focusing in on that goal. Don, you want to take a little admin work on this?
Yeah. So you guys are more than welcome to leave your cameras on. Jamie will actually mute everybody. Please feel free, if you have any questions at all, to either unmute yourself and just talk, or you can leave a comment or raise your hand, and I'll keep an eye on that and bring up anybody's questions during the talk. So please, we want this to be as interactive as possible. We'd love everybody to share their experience and what their thoughts are and their mindsets, because if you're feeling it, I'm sure other people have similar feelings or mindsets. So.
All right. So first, let's talk about the structure of success. So we're all trying to be successful, right? We're all trying to reach some sort of pinnacle or goal. But there's a definite structure to this. And let me start out with an example. You've all heard of a little company called Amazon, right? So we see where that success is right now. We see how large Bezos has built up Amazon, but obviously it didn't start there, but we don't really think about that. We just kind of see the end result. But it started out with him, if you didn't know this, and some of you may have already known this, is he was selling books out of his garage. So we didn't see all the little steps, all the little things that happened along the way that he did daily that eventually made it to this point. Success isn't a once in a lifetime event. It's a byproduct, or it's a product of daily habits. And this little quote I put here, change can take years before it happens all at once. It is a product of daily habits. No, there are, as it says, X's and O's that you have to implement. But first, you have to become more aware and build those X and O's on a foundation of your habits and your beliefs. What we want to do is we'll focus in onto those habits and how to get those habits actually driving your beliefs, because we think that is where our biggest downfall is when it comes to being successful.
And habits and beliefs lead into the main thing is you gotta decide what your identity will be. It's decide the type of person you want to be in terms of fitness. Like, you want to be athletic, you want to be more mobile, you want to be just overall healthy. Once you kind of say that to yourself, it's every choice you can kind of revert back to that and ask yourself, would that athletic person, would a mobile person, would a healthy person do this? So habits are formed from beliefs, or your identity. So focus on what you want to be, what you want to. So when we kind of redid our assessment process, one of the main things I end that assessment with is, what are your whys? Why do you want to accomplish all this? And I actually write that on our blackboard in our office. And I want everybody, in their reassessments to come back to that. And are you achieving your whys? Are you achieving your identity? So habits and beliefs are based upon identity. So you got to establish what you want to be. What are your whys? Why do you want to do this?
And we'll go into that a little bit more deeply as we go, but Tony can continue.
Um, like I said, establish your identity. You want to be a healthy person. And those take, it's not a big change, just like Jamie's example of Amazon. Amazon didn't get to be Amazon that it is now when it first started out. You got to start small. So just like Bezos selling books in his garage, if you're first starting out in fitness, create small little habits, small little wins. Example I always go back to, because most everybody can do it, is walking. Like if you can walk 10 minutes a day, even just 5 minutes a day, if you're really just struggling with, getting started, and you build upon those, you do it every day. Um, that might seem minute and might seem small, but overall, think about those minutes, all the calories you're expending as you go, and you can build upon that. So think of like making small little changes, small little wins, and not just going into, I got to work out an hour every day or 3 times a day, 4 times a day. Again, make your building a habit easy so you can build upon that and you can see a big change from that.
And the problem, as the slide says, the problem with both bad and good habits, there's a problem with bad habits, there's a problem with good habits. The problem with bad habits is they lead to instant gratification. Let me give you an example. We will just make up a person. We'll call him Mike. And let's say Mike loves peanut butter M&Ms. All right. When Mike takes those peanut butter M&Ms, he thinks about them, he eats them, there's an instant gratification. It makes his brain feel happy. You get a dopamine response. So that is the problem with bad habits. The problem with good habits is just the opposite. There's a delayed gratification. If I work out and the workout's hard, that is not a reward. I mean, I'm getting no gratification out of that. Now, on a I guess minor note, my gratification is I'm proud that I've done that workout. But again, you're not going to see the long-term effect or you're not going to get an instant gratification from eating one good meal or having one good workout. There's delayed gratification. It may take a while for you to see that. And so that's why building a good habit is difficult. One, because of the delayed gratification. Two, our progress is never linear. We always have these kind of ebbs and flows. I mean, if you track your weight on a daily basis, you're going to see kind of a reverse stock market pattern. And then that can then lead to frustration, and then that's where we lose our, let's say, motivation if we're just focused on a goal, right? So that's why building good habits are much harder than obviously building bad habits.
And an example of that, you think of an ice cube, sitting in a room, 25-degree room, okay? Temperature increases marginally. And this will go along with fitness, gets up to 26. You don't really see anything happen. 27, 28, 29, 30. You might see a little bit, but it's not enough to really, change the size of that ice cube, okay? But when we get to 31, 32, and 30, 32 degrees is that break point, that breakthrough moment, okay? And we see it in fitness all the time. We see it in the results of our clients. Little, but then, those habits will turn into change. And that's where the frustration can get involved. You can't, again, do not focus on goals, okay? You want to focus on the process and follow the process. Again, ask yourself what your identity will be, and hopefully that'll become who you are, become part of your habits, part of your routine, and part of your daily living. And just like you're going to have that breakthrough moment, you see, in our reassessments all the time, it's It's not linear, like Jamie says. And it's okay to plateau a little bit. Actually, it's good for your body to plateau a little bit so we can see another breakthrough moment and have a big change.
And that plateau is, it's just a moment in time, right? Because if you plateau and you're focused solely on the goal, that's where, again, frustration may appear. But if we understand maybe why that plateau happened, but we're focusing on the process, as Tony said, that plateau, it doesn't become as frustrating. Now, granted, we always want to see improvement every time, but if we are trying to be healthy, trying to get stronger, whatever the goal might be, it's a matter of having patience and looking for the tiny gains. And this is where that example that Tony gave in regard to the ice cube, that is what's called aggregation of marginal improvement or aggregation of marginal gains. You're basically just searching for tiny gains in all we do. So in this instance, if it's training, tiny gain, maybe you walked for, to use Tony's example, you walked for, instead of 5 minutes, you went 8 minutes one day. Like in the moment, we don't find that that is going to make a big difference, but there's a compounding effect of that. And then that's where, I mean, this is one thing that is kind of hard for us to wrap our minds around, because we are typically focused in on a goal, but we don't see the cost of a bad habit or the value of a good habit until we've looked back a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It takes that long sometimes. That's where the patience really has to take over, and a reliance upon not goals, but looking at, as we mentioned, identity and the process. Because outcomes, or our goals, are simply a lagging measure of our habits. For example, I'll give you a weight example. If I lost, or anyone lost 1 ounce a day, that's not much. It's 1/16 of a pound. You're thinking, that's nothing. But if that 1 ounce is lost over 365 days, each day, that equals approximately a 23-pound loss. And what you're also doing is you're building up those habits. You're building up the good habits by allowing for the tiny gain. So that 1 ounce is a tiny gain, right? But that compounding effect done over 365 days is about 23 pounds. And for anyone that is trying to lose weight, who wouldn't take that? But we kind of get into our minds that, oh, I need to lose 23 pounds in the next 3 months. But again, our progress isn't linear. So therefore, we can't rely upon just that outward goal. We have to rely upon those tiny gains, that aggregation of marginal improvement. Now,
that's why I always tell people that I'm not a big fan of, and most of our clients have a certain goal weight in mind, but I was telling them, like, I'm not personally, and like for my clients, I try to tell them, I'm not a big fan of a certain weight as a goal. Again, because our minds are embedded to want instant gratification. And if you are just looking at that number on the scale as your goal, that's not instant gratification. You're going to fail because you're going to get frustrated. So that's why, again, fall back to small little wins, small little habits, and ultimately what you want your identity to be. Again, take it day by day, not, losing 30, 40, 50 pounds, because that's not going to give you instant gratification that you're looking for.
Don, I'll let you keep going about forget about your goals.
So again, goals, the problem with goals, again, it's a delayed gratification. So focus on, again, falling in love with the process and falling in love with the system that you follow. And ultimately, you'll achieve that goal. Problem with goals is, again, like comparing it to sports, like winning a game, the two participants of that game have the same goal. But ultimately, it comes back to whichever team or person has fallen in love with the process, fallen in love with the identity that is, that daily grind that they did for like the Super Bowl, the daily grind, the daily work that these two teams, who is really believing in their identity, in their process, that's ultimately going to win that game. But goals are just like Jamie said, it's a moment in time. And once you achieve that goal, what are you going to do? You're going to be happy for achieving that goal, but then you're going to work to achieve another goal. Okay. So if we are focused strictly on goals, we're just going to be chasing that moment in time over and over and over again. And really, you might fall, and then you'll fall back to the same bad habits that you've been doing. So again, making sure that 10-minute walk, do it every day, fall in love, that becomes part of identity. You're a walker, you're a healthy person, and not trying to chase that 50-pound weight loss. So be more a system-based person, a habit-based person, and not a goal-based person, is what we're trying to do. What we try to tell everybody is pick out those small little wins, not going for that lagging of that ultimate goal that you have.
So just with everybody on here, whether it's just unmute yourselves, who has been chasing the same goal for years? Anybody? Throw it out. Nobody, really. Interesting. I tell you what, I have been. I mean, and again, I fall back to the same problem. We have our focus on our goals, and I work in the same manner, meaning I have that same mindset sometimes. I'm working to change it, but if it's a matter of I want to look a certain way or I want to get to a certain point, it's very easy to continue to change that or to chase that same goal. So what do we need to do? How do we need to correct this? We need to start changing our inputs, and that is our system, our identity, and let the outputs take care of themselves. It's simply, like we mentioned, focusing on the system. So instead of focusing on that one outward item, that moment in time, we're going to start focusing on the process. And as Tony said, goals are about trying to win the game. Systems are about trying to continue to play the game. So even when you reach that goal, you still have continuous improvement before there. Because as Tony alluded to, it is our default settings are crap. Like my default setting is not better than the system I'm following, I'm putting into play to reach my fat loss goal or muscle gain goal or whatever it might be. Just always understand that we're looking for continuous improvement beyond that moment in time, and understand what your default settings are. So the main takeaway here is this: if you don't remember anything else in this workshop, you do not rise to the level of your goal, you fall back to the level of your system. Which means I could have this lofty goal, I'm probably not going to get there just based upon me wanting that goal. I have to rise, I have to improve the level of my system, and that will then take me to my goal. So again, do not rise to the level of your goal, but you will fall to the level of your system. So let's talk about being outcome-based. Outcome is simply focused on what you get. You got a new goal, you got a new plan, but you're never changing who you believe yourself to be. It's a matter of sabotaging yourself. So an old identity can sabotage new plans for change. Let me give you an example. So let's say there's two people that smoked. If I offer one a cigarette, that person may say, no, I'm trying to quit smoking. I offer one to another person, and that person says, no, I'm not a smoker. Which one do you think is going to be more successful? The one that says, no, I'm not a smoker, is actually starting to train themselves, believe in themselves that that's not something they do. Whereas the one that's saying, I'm trying to quit smoking, still believes they're a smoker. So don't underestimate the power of just what you tell yourself. And I'll get into that a little bit more here in a moment.
And then fitness wise,
So now yeah, go ahead.
Fitness wise, that example that Jamie used as a smoker can be used, if you're trying to lose weight, you go finish dinner, relax, turn on the TV, that carton of ice cream is looking at you in the freezer, right? So are you asking yourself, I'm trying to lose weight, or am I a healthy person? And again, going back to what you set your identity to be, what you believe your identity to be, you ask yourself that in that moment of time, you'll be less likely to go for that ice cream if you tell yourself, I'm a healthy person, so I'm trying to lose weight. You're yourself for failure. You're going to say, trying to lose weight, I can lose tomorrow. Everybody have, also, going to report ice cream and bad days, but a system-based person will not have multiple bad days, okay? Because they believe in what you set your identity to be, okay? So again, making sure that you set your identity to believe in that system and not have those multiple bad days.
So just from a little diagram standpoint, let's talk about outcome versus identity. So the priority on an outcome is a social layer, number one. Then that drives the little process. And then your tertiary component is who you actually are, who you believe yourself to be. Versus the identity, it starts with your focus on who you are. And then that actually ramps up the process or your system. And then the outcome, as we spoke about, is that more superficial layer of what that goal is. We always want to start with our self-belief, and then that will transpire into the byproduct of the outcome or the goal, if you will. How do we change our identity? Because again, that is kind of the overarching theme to this workshop is changing the identity. One, we are bombarded with so much information out there. And the first step is to train yourself or unlearn our current beliefs. And that's driven by how we grew up. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I mean, I'm wired a certain way because of the habits I formed early on. It's also driven by environment, because environment definitely drives behavior. It's also a matter of what we've been told in social media, friends, family, some bro at the gym. Like all these beliefs, our current beliefs, are based upon environment, how we're wired, what we grew up with, and any information that's been coming in. An example, a personal example, is carbohydrates. So I grew up in the era where carbohydrates were the devil. You eat a carbohydrate, you're going to gain weight. They're going to be detrimental to your health. I know better. I mean, I've seen the evidence, but it's still wired within me that when I'm searching for a goal, if I'm trying to get leaner or whatever I'm trying to do, my mindset goes to, oh, I need to just eat protein and vegetables. Okay, yeah, I do need to eat protein and vegetables. However, it doesn't negate the carbohydrate that I can have. But again, that is a long time belief that I've had that I have to change. And by putting it into practice of, oh, I can eat carbohydrates and still get results, by implementing those small actions, just doing that helps me to unlearn my old beliefs.
And a training example, Jamie went into a nutrition example of a bad habit. For me personally, like a training example of a good habit is what I surrounded. So my family moved from the Philippines. For those of you who don't know, I was born in the Philippines. We moved to St. Louis in 1985. Um, I was a very active kid, and my parents being immigrants coming from the Philippines, growing up in the Philippines, they didn't really have they didn't know what St. Louis was going to be about. We moved here in 1985, right at the boom of the 1985 Cardinals, right? So that summer, fell in love with St. Louis Cardinals, fell in love with baseball, and overall just fell in love with sports in general. So my parents not really knowing baseball, knowing sports, American sports, is me and my brother, created a kind of bond of watching sports together, playing sports together. We kind of just immersed ourselves in the Cardinals, the Blues, the football Cardinals, and just American sports in general. So anytime we get, we play against each other, we watch together. He taught me what he learned. He's 6 years older than me, so I think it kind of embedded me at an early age that playing sports is fun, but it's also, as I grew older, this is a good way to, stay fit. And so again, that's a example of my environment, a very impressionable young age of how I kind of got started in the training industry. I just wanted to always be active, playing sports, and now with 3 kids and in my mid 40s, I still want that to be part of my identity. I still want to be able to if I'm coaching my kids' team and they need another player or they need an example to do the drill, I want to be athletic enough, mobile enough, fit enough to be able to show that example or to be able to be that 10th person to play 5-on-5 basketball with them. Again, that started as an early age. So part of your identity is the people that you surround yourself with, what you do, what your activities are. So make sure that when you're forming that identity, that you make it easy to feed that identity, to surround yourself with activities, to surround yourself with people that will feed into that identity. And, here at Functional Elements, I think the culture and the community that we built helps with that. People come in, our one-on-one clients, they fall in love with coming in at, George, Mike, 10 a.m. every day or Tuesday, Thursday to be within that community, be within that culture, our microgroup training, our morning people, that is part of their identity now. They want to come in, they don't want to disappoint the people in that group. They want to show up. So as much as you can surround yourself with people who have the same beliefs, habits, and identities, you'll become more successful at achieving that habit and ultimately your goal.
And so that's why daily affirmations, they're proven to work, because it imparts on a daily basis positive thinking, positive. And so the story you tell yourself is the person you will become. If you don't change that aspect, it's going to be very, very difficult to actually become that person. If you, as Tony mentioned earlier, I want to lose weight versus I want to be a healthy person. That's a great example of almost a daily affirmation when it comes to weight loss that you can start implementing. Other examples of this, both good and bad. My son, Owen, 14, always has, maybe it's his age, but if he has a bad shooting day in basketball, what's he telling himself? He can't shoot. He can't shoot. He can't shoot. He actually says it. And I keep telling him, knock that off, because what you tell yourself will happen. So if he continually tells himself, even though it's just some words, his brain is going to go in that direction. He may not be able to shoot that. There's no confidence there in what he's doing. Other examples, I'm terrible with direction. I'm not a morning person. I'm always late. Or on the flip side, I am the type of person that gets up and works out, or I'm the type of person that just gets up early. I am a healthy eater. I mean, it's the story that you tell yourself that it's going to drive your actions, your habits, and ultimately that outcome. You got to remember, our beliefs build behaviors. So if you're continually telling yourself, what you continually tell yourself will lead to different beliefs and then to new actions. So continuing on with changing the identity, I mentioned actions, and this is a key component. Is that repeated behavior reinforces identity. So the more you repeat the behavior, the more it's going to reinforce the identity associated with that behavior. Which means if every evening I'm going for ice cream, I'm reinforcing that behavior. My brain is like, hey, this is what we do every night. Versus if I'm going out for a 30-minute walk with the dog, even though I don't want to, I do it. And that behavior is reinforcing the identity that I want to achieve. Basically, what that means is we just have to accrue evidence. We have to just give our minds more and more evidence of who we are wanting to be. And in this case, I mean, I look at it as casting votes. Because the more evidence you accrue, the more strongly you're going to believe what that action is telling you, if that makes sense. So if we think about every action as a vote for either a better identity or an old identity. We simply need to have more votes cast for the good identity. We don't need a unanimous decision or a unanimous vote. If you have 7 votes for the new identity and 3 votes for the old identity, you're still going to win. We have to allow those votes to mount up. Once those start mounting up, now your story that you're telling yourself is going to change.
And it doesn't require a radical change, just going back to that example of 10-minute walks. Again, casting your vote for that 10-minute walk, performing that 10-minute walk more often than not. Again, you're casting your vote of changing your identity to be a healthy person instead of going back to an old identity before if you weren't doing those 10-minute walks. Again, just accruing votes for your new identity. And again, like Jamie said, it doesn't have to be unanimous, just, 6 out of 4, 7 out of 3. The more and more you do it, the more votes are cast, and that'll ultimately, tell yourself that you're doing this. You're becoming your new identity.
Just remember, your new identity requires new evidence. If you keep casting the same votes you've always casted, you're going to get the same results that you've always gotten. So, as this says, the most practical way to change who you are is change what you do. So changing those small actions, again, going back to the aggregation of small improvement or aggregation of gain, is just tiny little votes on a daily basis that then can become habits. All right, so where do we go from here? What are the initial steps? First and foremost, you have to decide the type of person you want to be. And then, as we've been saying this whole time, you have to then start proving it to yourself with small wins. So if you decide the type of person you want to be is stronger, I'm the type of person that is strong. Well, whether it's 5 push-ups a day to start out, that is a small win. Maybe you go to 6, maybe you go to 7, maybe you go into a gym and you're there for 10 minutes doing something. Those are small wins. Again, doesn't have to be a radical change, just has to be a compounding effect of these small actions. Once you implement this, now we start changing the identity. We start shifting from a goal-oriented mindset or an outcome-based mindset to the identity-based mindset. And therefore, you have the feedback loop, which once those actions take place, that starts shaping your identity. You start becoming that person, and now that identity starts shaping better and better habits. But again, it all starts with the mindset of what type of person do you want to be? An example, I don't know the woman. I didn't work with her. I just read the story about her. And we brought this up a couple of times, but this is a real life example of a woman who wanted to lose weight. I don't know how much her initial goal was, that outcome. But all she simply did was ask yourself, when it came to exercise, when it came to nutrition, what would a healthy person do? And she based her whole mindset around making choices that a healthy person would do. And she ended up losing 100 pounds, literally 100 pounds. So again, she just kept the mindset as to what type of person does she want to be. She made that decision. And then every little thing she did in regard to her health was based upon just getting that small win. So
And just
again,
reverting back to that diagram that Jamie showed with the feedback loop is you got to start with that. You got to start with yourself, saying yourself that I'm a healthy person, and making every choice and decision based upon that first circle of identity. And then you'll work your way towards your outcome. Just similar to fitness, we always say, you have to start from your core and your base. So with your core of your body and your feet, that's where it starts. If you don't have mobility, stability there, the limbs won't follow. You can't start from the outside. You can't start with your arms. You can't start with achieving big biceps. It's gotta start from the inside out. So just the base of a house, foundation of a house. Everything starts from the base and the core. And just like if you revert back to that diagram of starting with your identity and working your way out, you're going to go a long ways of achieving that ultimate goal.
all right, so keep going if you want.
Okay. So again, always be asking yourself, are you outcome based or are you identity based? And if you revert back to the latter, that outcome will happen. If you make small daily choices, small daily wins, you're going to be the type of person that you want to be. But going towards that direction of the person you want to be is starting with that identity, not always looking towards that outcome. Because again, that outcome is going to be lagging. That's a long term. And if you always focus on that, you're going to fail and you're going to be frustrated because you're not reaching that 30-pound loss or 40-pound loss or whatever. Or if that story that Jamie told of the lady that lost 100 pounds, if her goal was to lose 100 pounds, but she's always focused on that 100-pound number and not her true identity, what she wants to be, she would fail and then get frustrated and then revert back to being the weight that she was. So again, byproduct is the outcome, but if you focus on identity, you'll get those small little wins that'll keep you motivated, that'll keep you going.
All right, so how do we start all this? I mean, one, we talked about understanding or choosing the type of person you want to be. But when it comes to action, one, let me actually take a step back. Let's see. Somebody can just unmute and let me know, multiple people, please. But right now, whatever your goal is or whatever you're trying to accomplish, are you currently outcome-based or do you feel you're more identity-based? Melissa, what about you?
I think now I'm more identity-based than outcome.
Mm-hmm. How long did that take?
I mean, it's taken a while.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a few years to get to that point.
Yeah. Long process, right?
Yeah.
Yep. What about Amanda? What about you? Outcome-based or identity-based at this point? Or maybe somewhere in between.
Exactly. I think I'm in between. I think it depends on, I mean, I kind of toggle between both of them. Sometimes I wish I wasn't so much outcome based, but it just is a habit.
Yeah.
But really trying to put in perspective that my age and the changing of my body after having 3 kids, all of that come into play, that I need to be more on the other end because the outcome's not getting me anywhere.
Yes. Yes. And I know just in my own life, I can tell over the course of the last 5 or 10 years, again, it's taken that long. And am I where I want to be as far as identity based? No. But when I look back 5 years or so, I eat totally different now than I had back then. I was very much an all or nothing type of person back then. Either I was all on or I wasn't on at all. Now I understand. I mean, but again, it's taken kind of some mind training, if you will, to get to the point I am right now. So I think a lot of us are in the same boat in the fact that we're kind of somewhere in between. I feel I'm getting better, and Melissa, sounds like you are as well. But again, it is a longer term process. But I always go back to a goal. That goal, whatever it is simply a moment in time. That if we can just make these small changes and don't look week to week, but look month to month, year to year, how much better have we gotten because of our changing mindset? So going back to where we were before I took a step back is, how do we start the process? Very simply, you don't start with something extreme. And that's where like New Year's resolutions just absolutely drive me nuts, because people put this huge goal out there and they try to match their game plan, whatever that might be, to the extreme of, or to how extreme their goal is. But again, our process is simply, what are the 1 or 2 actions you can implement right now to start casting positive votes? And that could be adding a good one. For me, I mean, one simple one that I hadn't always done up until last year is, first thing in the morning, I drink a big glass of water. Does that change a whole lot about my results? Not in that day, but it has now become a habit. If I don't do it, I feel off. So that has started to become my identity. So adding the good or removing the bad, which could be, and we'll talk about cues and triggers later. Do any of you have one that is just on the top of your mind that you know, like, okay, this is an easy thing I can do? What is the good or bad, adding a good or removing a bad action that you can take right now? Tony, do you have any?
Yeah, I have one of the main things that I look to improve upon is when I get home, trying to be more present at home. It's, not having, that's the time that's, I see my wife, I see my kids, maybe the first time I see them throughout that day because I wake up so early, just trying to be more present at home. So I've been removing a bad by plugging in my phone and charging it, that it's away from me, like in the kitchen, okay, or on our charging station, but it's away from me. So I'm not continually on my phone, and trying to be present to my family, understanding, if Malaya, my 7-year-old daughter, is just do right when we get home, telling us about her day, what went good, what went bad, what she did bad. She's constantly telling on herself and dancing and singing. And, the old me would be just kind of just like try to put that in the back burner, not really listen to her. So removing a bad habit, just taking that phone away, not right next to me, is really helping with that.
And I mentioned earlier that environment drives behavior, not to go on too much of a tangent, but environment drives behavior. So that's a great example of Tony changing his environment to foster a better habit. It's one thing that when I'm talking nutrition to clients, I really try to hone in on is, what is the environment like? And the example I give is if I'm tired, stressed out from the day, I get home and there is a bowl of peanut M&Ms on the table versus frozen chicken at the bottom of the freezer, which one is gonna probably get eaten? Probably not the chicken, because proximity to food is a major driver of our choices. Those peanut M&Ms right there are much easier. And then that actually small action, because I get instant gratification from that, is probably going to drive a worse habit, if you will, versus having maybe chicken prep and those M&Ms being 2 miles away at a gas station. Again, changing the environment, I'm probably going to go towards the better action, which then can change into a better habit, then eventually become a better habit. So I guess my homework for you at this point, you don't have to announce them, but think about, write down what are the 1 to 2 actions you can implement right now to cast a positive vote. And I'm sure we all have them. I mean, I'm sure there's something in our life that you're like, yeah, that's going to hold me back. And it could be as simple as not watching as much of Netflix, or it could be some nutritional aspect, or even an exercise aspect, just something that is going to make it better for you to start changing the mindset, changing the identity, and changing then your actions. All right, so there is one thing.
For
so Tony
like
and I were.
Jamie,
Go ahead, Tony.
Jamie, for your, drinking water, first thing you do, drink a big glass of water. Just making it easier for you to do that is, what I do is make my coffee, but then I have my Yeti getting ready to get filled for that day. That reminds me, I'm going to drink my water first instead of having my coffee first. Okay. For me, removing a bad cue, my phone, but adding a good cue, which is, my Yeti. I see it first thing in the morning, reminding me, let's have some water first before that coffee. So however easy you guys can make it, whether it's a cue of adding in or removing a bad one, just make it easier on yourself. It takes small, simple actions to make that habit doable on a daily basis.
And again, those things all lead to other actions. We talked about the feedback loop, which is your identity, or your habits shape your identity shapes your habit. Once you start building those habits, it's much, much easier to then start layering in other small actions. And again, we talked about the compounding effect. We think about becoming 1% better every day. It doesn't mean you don't have to be 50% better every day, 100% better, just 1% every day. And over the course of months, years, etc., it will actually have a remarkable result. Now, the last thing we want to cover before we go into Q&A is just nothing deep, but I want you to understand the 4 parts of the habit loop. The reason being is, if you can recognize maybe where your cues or your triggers are, that is a good step in understanding or in changing your actions a bit. So cue and all habits, bad or good, go in this order: cue, which is your trigger; craving; response, which is your action; and then the reward. Every one of them. A quick example, a very, prevalent example of my own is popcorn. I love it. But what I found is when I have popcorn, I then want chocolate. Strange. However, so my cue is I eat popcorn, right? My craving is I want chocolate, because there's an instant gratification there. My response, if I'm not doing very well, is I won't try to find any chocolate in the house. And then the reward is that instant gratification, that little dopamine response that my brain gets. However, I don't want to stop eating popcorn, so I got to change the response. So if I still have popcorn, and I've done this before, if I have popcorn, I'm still going to have that craving I'm still going to have the craving of chocolate, but my action can change. My action, which I've tried to implement, I'm not always successful, is just avoidance of the chocolate. Now you're thinking, well, how does that give me a reward? It doesn't give me an instant gratification. It gives me a delayed gratification, because then either that evening or when that kind of craving passes, and then the next day, I feel better. I feel, one, proud that I've accomplished that. Even though it's so small and tiny, I'm proud that I've accomplished that. And actually, physically, I feel better. Because for some reason, when I have popcorn, I want to eat everything. So in your own life, what are your cues? Like good or bad? Actually, let's not even talk about good ones. Let's talk about bad, I guess, cues, the things that drive you, whether it's you get home and every night you have dinner and every night you're like, oh, I feel like a glass of wine, or I feel like jumping on Netflix, or I feel like whatever. Does anybody else have an example like that that you can share? Now, not everybody at once, please, but just pop your camera up and let us know. Or Tony, if you have one, because we have quite a quiet group today.
Dessert
Let's think
after
about the
dinner.
cues.
Dessert
ahead, Mom.
after dinner. Dessert after
Yep.
dinner.
So if that is something you want to change, what is a different action that you can take to, let's say, change that habit loop?
Maybe have a glass of water.
Okay. I thought you were going to say have a glass of wine. I'm like, that's
Well, yeah,
maybe not.
I could have a glass of wine too. Amaretto, really.
So one thing I've
Ooh,
done, 'cause I also
amaretto,
like,
even better.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Melissa.
so one thing I've done, because I also like dessert after dinner, is I actually do a piece of fruit now instead of something sweet, because you get some sweetness out of the fruit. So it does help.
Mhm.
Oh, good.
And I feel that, Melissa, like once you've done that a few times, maybe you still are craving that dessert, but once you start making that a habit, do you feel like your brain or your mind says, okay, this is what we're gonna have the fruit, and the importance of the quote unquote dessert, it becomes less and less?
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is a great example of just switching the action to something else that gives you, it probably won't be the magnitude of reward that maybe a dessert would get, or in my instance, chocolate would give me. But again, it's just taking the action, changing that so that there is still some sort of reward in there. And once your brain kind of gets used to that process and following that habit loop, again, it's just going to lead to more and more layering in of other habits. Tony, were you going to say something?
And Dorothy, to go along with your example, and what we said about making it easy, removing bad cues and adding good cues is whatever that dessert is. If it's ice cream, like put it in the freezer where it's hard to get to, like very bottom drawer of the freezer, where on the bottom of everything else is on top of it. Or candy, putting it in the back of your pantry, where you have to get a step stool and get it. Okay.
Make it hard.
Removing bad cues where it's difficult, and you're going to have those moments where you're going to dig into the freezer and dig it out. But make it work for yourself to get that bad cue. Getting to that bad cue, but also, like Melissa said, eating fruit, making it accessible. The fruit easier accessible, like right on top of the refrigerator within hand's reach, or right on top of the counter.
I'll move my ice cream down to the freezer downstairs rather than the one above the refrigerator.
Yeah, and put that amaretto right next to it as well.
Oh, okay, all right.
And I just want to reiterate that point. I know it's a little off tangent, but I mean, don't underestimate proximity to food. Yeah, innately we are wired to be lazy when it comes to food and getting food. The problem with our environment now is food is all around. So if there are triggers in regard to food, you've got to put them farther away or harder to get. Proximity to food, like I said, is a major driver of our food choices. So whether it's not having it in the house or taking a little more work to acquire, is highly advantageous. There was actually a small article I read not long ago that, I don't know what candy it was. I think it was M&Ms, but there was a bowl of M&Ms near the person sitting at the table and a bowl of carrots farther away. And what they found was it didn't matter what the food was. the food option that was closest is what that person ate. And so just again, in your own life, like where are your cues? Where are your triggers that might be holding you back from changing your identity and then ultimately reaching that outcome? All right, Tony, any last words before we go Q&A?
Anybody else? Anybody else have a bad habit? Try to do those.
We're kind of cutting out a little bit there, Tom.
Anybody have examples of bad
We
habits
don't have any more examples.
that,
All right, I think we're losing you, Tom, internet-wise.
I had an example I
So-
was going to share. If you wanted one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to say one of
Fire
mine
away.
that I like is instead of going out to dinner with friends, I meet them at the park and we go for a walk. Where you still, you get your
Excellent.
exercise and the friendship, and without all the calories. Can be a nice way to catch up.
Mhm. Yes. Actually, I mean, there is such a net benefit to that overall. In that, I mean, if we're just talking calorie based, I mean, you're actually switching the script. Instead of taking in more, you're actually using more. So excellent. My computer is kind of messing up. Can everybody still see me and hear me?
Hear, not
Anybody?
see.
See you.
Okay.
I can hear.
I
I
don't
can hear
know.
you, but
It's
not
messing
see.
up somehow. Okay. Thank you. So does anybody have, before we wrap up, does anybody have any questions?
I have a comment. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Jamie?
Yep.
I am reading this note that you put in my nutrition report from November. And it says, at this point, simply focus on good nutritional choices and reach the deficit through a greater awareness and more activity. So to your point about keeping things simple, that really hits home.
Good. Yep. Okay. Well, come in here. Sorry, Jamie's computer cut out. So, Chris, what are you doing to feed that phrase that Jamie wrote?
So even on my worst motivation day, just trying to get out for a walk at a minimum. And on other days, I try to make it to my men's workout group.
Good. Good. And what helps you with that?
And simply eat.
What helps you with that is going back to the identity that you're trying to accomplish, right?
Sure.
Telling yourself you want to be a healthy person instead of that ultimate goal of whatever your ultimate goal is, weight wise, body fat wise, feeding into your identity instead of focusing on that outcome, having small daily wins, like going for that walk, going into your men's workout group, feeds into that, making better nutrition choices, whether it be small as like Melissa said, picking that fruit instead of the dessert. Keep that up. Keep stacking votes for those.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, answers, concerns, comments? Wrap it up. So again, the main thing that we wanted to take away, that we wanted to provide you guys is always look to your identity, not what you're trying to ultimately accomplish in terms of fitness or nutrition. what you're telling yourself that you want to be, that's who you're going to be. And make daily choices, those small daily choices based upon that identity that you're trying to establish. And again, you're going to have bad days, but just as long as those bad days don't happen in sequence and you have multiple of them in a row, you're going to have bad days. Everybody does. You're going to feel not motivated. You're going to want that dessert. You're going to want that chocolate. You're not going to want to work out. But again, it's feeding back to asking yourself who you want to be, what the identity you're trying to accomplish that'll help with those bad days. All right. I appreciate you guys joining us. Here's Jamie.
My computer crashed.
Appreciate you guys. We're going to have we're going to try this monthly. The last one was number. So just to get because we want everybody to share. We want to be able to share our experiences with everybody. Again, if you're going through something that's difficult or you're implementing something that's good, I think it's important for everybody to know those and hear those from other people, because probably somebody is experiencing the same thing. So thank you for sharing. Thanks for joining us. This is recorded as well. If you know somebody that will be here, we're going to send a link out to view all this as well. All right. Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.